And we are live and we are late because this is going to be such a great show. We couldn't help but argue
But kick Steve out.
before we got started. And Steve just dropped off. But I am your host, Hank Garner. With me today, as usual, Rick Partlow, Josh Hayes, Steve Bowyer was here and looks like he just popped back on. There he's back.
I was trying to log in so that I could communicate with people in the chat, and it went, no, F you, you're gone. See you later.
Womp, womp, womp.
Womp, womp, womp. Well, this is the Rewrite a Novel in 60 Days with Dabble Challenge, the podcast with 8 eyes and all the heart.
I like that intro. I like that.
Actually,
What are you trying to say, Hank?
Since all of us, all of us are wearing glasses, so technically we'd have like 16 eyes, right?
Nice.
Well, yeah. So I tried to be clever, and my cleverness had a plot hole in it. Yeah, that's what you get. So today we're talking plot holes. And I wondered if this would be a good topic or not. And everyone has opinions about plot holes. Do plot holes matter? Because as Steve was saying a minute ago, if you love characters and you're really engaged in character and following their journey, do plot intricacies really matter? We're going to talk about it today. I sent the guys last night an article that I just stumbled on. I think it was 10 movies with plot holes. And I was just looking over the article. Some of them are kind of splitting hairs. Some of them, are giant plot holes that you could, fly 747 through. And some of them are movies, books that we all love, and we just give them a pass because we love them. So, what makes a story passable? What allows us to give something a pass when it so obviously doesn't work plot wise?
I think the biggest example of plot holes not mattering is Harry Potter.
And there are numerous.
There are and he's out. Look, Steve, come back. Come back, Steve.
The man that literally has Harry Potter tattoos.
Disclaimer: I love Harry Potter. I've read the series.
Doesn't sound like
times.
it.
No. Let me
start trashing J.K. Rowling too.
Hold on. So, you can look to multiple examples, but the biggest example I can find is the Time Turner. And it seems like every book they have a device like the Time Turner that they use for one book and then completely forget about it. Yeah. If they had the time, I know, Steve, you're going to say something. Hold on. Put your hand down. If you had the Time Turner, why didn't Dumbledore just use it to go back and fix what he'd done?
Because he's very clear in the books that it can't be used for things even like saving Buckbeak. They went against Dumbledore's wishes, against Dumbledore's rules.
But Voldemort is killing like everyone. Isn't that a big enough?
If you had a Time Turner and you had an opportunity to go back and kill Hitler, so many of us would say, yes, I would do it, but we don't know the repercussions. That's why there are time travel rules in everything from Star Trek to Harry Potter.
Hot Tub Time Machine.
We don't know.
Die Hard.
We could have a worse situation, but at least at this point, we've learned to cope with, deal with, and move past situations, even though they have repercussions. But like most often, sorry, I'm so passionate about this because yes, Harry Potter is my fandom, right? Most people that come up with plot holes for Harry Potter are basing it almost entirely on the movies, which completely fail. The nuances involved in the decisions that were made and the things that happened. Why did Draco, Harry, and them get sentenced to detention in the Forbidden Forest, which is A, forbidden, be totally dangerous, right? Because Argus Filch was the one that wanted them to go there, and he would rather string up people in a dungeon and torture them, right? And then Hagrid continually has a complete he doesn't understand how dangerous the beasts really are. So he thinks, oh, this is fine. We'll bring the kids into the dungeon. Like Dumbledore didn't send them into the dungeon. Neither did Minerva. Like the movie sucked in terms of explaining the really good details that the books actually do a great job covering. Are there plot holes?
I would argue that a movie is not the right vehicle to interpret a book.
For sure. You got to
for that fact specifically.
Yep. They're currently talking about, and it might be nonsense, but they're currently talking about redoing the entire series as a television show where each season would be a book, and it would allow them to actually delve into some of the deeper subjects that do exist in Harry Potter.
Well, you know, they make movies based on short stories.
Yeah.
And that's about the right length to make a movie on. So trying to make one of those huge, massive Harry Potter books into a movie, they have to cut probably
a lot,
2/3 of it.
Hell, the Order of the Phoenix and even the Goblet of Fire, those movies had like very minimal events from the book comparatively speaking, like to the story. There was so much more that happened in those books, but
yeah.
And
anyway, I'm glad I brought up Harry Potter just to throw us on a whole tangent of stuff.
Anyway, I didn't read Harry Potter, so let's go something I know anything.
Get out of here, Steve.
We'll just say one more thing, though. Like, J.K. Rowling acknowledged a lot of her plot holes throughout the course of the series. She didn't have the benefit that a lot of us indie writers have of writing an entire series before releasing a series. And, you know, even things like the Deathly Hallows, like those things should have been incorporated through books 1 through 4 in a way that they weren't. And if they were, like book 7 would have made a lot more sense, but she was sort of retrospectively building the world because book 1 was written on napkins in a coffee shop, right? And rejected over and over and over again. And so she didn't know what this was going to become. Star Wars.
Hard to keep continuity on napkins.
Right? It's hard to. Anyway, I'll shut up about Harry Potter now.
Well, I have one other thing to say about Harry Potter, and you guys tell me if this is it qualifies as a plot hole or not. But in the whole series, Voldemort cannot kill Harry using magic, and that's the only thing he ever tries. Could he not have poisoned him? Could he not have gotten a gun into the wizarding world and shot him?
Plot hole is why didn't he just shoot him? Right?
Yeah, why didn't he just shoot him?
It's England. They have really strict gun control.
They do have gun control, but you've got to filter. Of course, with any fiction, you've got to filter it through, just the world that was created. Right? You've got Ron Weasley's father, who is. He asked the question, what exactly is the purpose of a rubber duck? Right? Like they're so ignorant of the Muggle world. You could question whether or not they think a gun's a toy, right? Like one of the other bigger factors that I think often gets ignored about Harry is that Harry himself, spoiler, is a Horcrux. He is a piece of Voldemort's soul. And so there are so many things
out there.
Incorporated.
Is a Horcrux like a whore dog?
Yes, it's like a whore dog.
Okay.
Even like why do Petunia and Vernon hate him so much? We see that in book 6 when Ron has, or maybe it was book 7, when Ron is wearing the Horcrux and he becomes this really violent thing, right? Like they are experiencing the effects of Harry being a Horcrux in that hatred for him. And so
how come his friends didn't hate him then?
That's a great question, but there's probably deeper answers in that. I don't know. I really don't. Those are some sort of plot holes that exist, but like
that was a great hole, Hank.
Why didn't he shoot him? Right? If he would have shown up at friggin' Gryffindor, whatever that wherever they were. I can't remember the name of that little town. And just popped him with a magnum, it would have all been over.
Of course, Harry's a wizard. He could have like wizarded away the bullet.
But like, why is every villain so completely useless when it comes to the hero of the show?
Yeah.
Why can they kill everyone but the one guy?
We couldn't kill him though because he was part of him, right?
Well,
yeah, he didn't know that.
Didn't
That's
know
why
that.
Harry lived. Harry lived because he didn't recognize, exactly what had happened in that moment of creating Horcrux.
Maybe he subconsciously knew that Harry was a Horcrux, and that's why he kept failing to kill him.
And when you say Horcrux, I hear horror. When I say it, I don't. And then I heard that's how he knew he was a Horcrux.
I'm giving all of you detention, by the way.
In the Forbidden Forest?
In the Forbidden Forest.
Right, but let's start Star Wars. Like
3 points to Gryffindor.
Plot holes.
Star Wars is one giant plot hole that they made story surrounding.
Star Wars has so many plot holes because Lucas retconned everything after the
wrote 300 books to explain why everything was the way it was, and then Disney went, nah, here's some new stuff, and it's all garbage.
Yeah.
Well, even before Disney, before any of the books, the first Star Wars movie, I don't care what Lucas says, he's a big fat liar. He did not know that Darth Vader was Luke's father. He did not know that Leia was Luke's sister. He didn't know any of that when he wrote the first Star Wars movie. He made all that stuff up on the fly.
If they sent Luke to hide from his father, why send him to a planet that his father's from and not change his last name?
Right.
Why is Luke this peasant farmer boy and then you Princess Leia? Like what?
And why, when he originally wrote Star Wars, did he have Luke being 2 years older than Leia and then say, "Oh no, I knew all along they were twins"?
Right.
Yeah.
I think that it suffers from we don't have a lot of forgiveness or grace for other people's work where we do for ourselves, right? We get to book 3 in a series. Rick's got a 12-book series. How often do we get to a point in a series where we go, man, I wish I would have done X, Y, or Z? And then we really kind of can't do it. Or we find that magical way of making it work, right? Lucas got to episode 3 and he's like, episode 6. And he's like, man, it would be really great if. He's like, does it work? Go back, check all the continuity. It works really loosely. I could pass it off.
I don't blame him for not having planned it ahead of time because we've all been there as writers. But
just admit
my beef with that is he didn't choose the best thing that would fit them and still be dramatically effective. I read back in 1981 or 2, right after Empire came out, I read
I'd just been born.
I hadn't been born yet.
I read a speculation about what the last Return of the Jedi was going to be, what the plot would be, how they bring all this together. And the speculation this guy wrote was 100 times better than anything Lucas came up with. And I'm
you've heard the whole theory of the Gray Jedi, right?
No, I haven't heard that one.
I'm not going to do it justice, so I'm not even going into it. But my point is that predictions and they dive deep into things where I go, man, if they would just open up the writer's room or, whatever it looks like in the movie field to some of the most diehard fans, we would get such better stories.
Yeah.
Because we're all sitting around, we're not looking at it for money. We're looking at it for this has been our entertainment for 35, 40 years. And if they just did this, man,
Well, the guy had such a great explanation for the Clone Wars that it was so much better than what actually happened. In his version of it, the Jedis were all clones of original Force-sensitive people to make them to use them as warriors, and that's why Luke felt that Darth Vader was telling the truth when he said he was his father, because he's his father's clone. And the guy's idea was that Luke's father had faked his own death and then become a famous bounty hunter, faking killing Jedis when he was actually bringing them into hiding, waiting for the time to come out when they return and help take back the galaxy. And so Luke's father was Boba Fett in that idea.
Now
Which would have made Boba Fett actually mean something to the plot, by the way.
which the movie, the show was the dumbest thing ever, because the only reason we love Boba Fett was because he was that badass assassin that never
He had the
talked.
little figure that launched the rocket.
Yep, and then all of a sudden we have a real person inside this suit. No one cares about him. It doesn't, whether it was
I
entertaining
never
or
understood why anyone cared about Boba Fett at all.
not. I don't either.
I don't understand it.
It
didn't make any sense to me.
It was the
It was
toy
the
that
toy.
launched the little rocket.
Kenner really snagged us with some of the toys.
Yeah.
I was going to say that I have a way of pulling in what we just talked about into the author world quite a bit, and that is that idea of hive mind thinking. We have a lot of authors with Athon who have wildly popular Patreon accounts. I'm talking about these guys make $50,000 a month on their Patreons.
Wow.
Jesus.
They don't need Kindle. They don't need Audible. They've got devoted fans. And what they do on their Patreons is they release sort of their books, chapters, and things ahead of time before we see them, before the public sees them. And the whole hive mind goes, what would be better? And then the author, he's not like sitting around going, yeah, but this is my baby. These are my darlings. He goes, if you think it'd be better and the whole group thinks it would be better, here's the direction the story's going. And that's why we see guys like Shirtaloon, Seth Ring, First to Fire, all of those guys. That's why they're so massive. Because
Shirtaloon takes showers in his golden Lamborghini, right?
Right? But what they've done is they've brought their fans into it, and the fans feel like they have attributed to the work so much that it feels like it's theirs.
Yeah.
And of course, none of us necessarily have the opportunity to just I'm going to create a $50,000 a month Patreon. I know that that's not that's a privilege.
Hold on, I'm going to go do that right now.
But I think if authors
We just lost Rick.
if authors took reviews a little more seriously, and instead of just going, well, I don't care what a reviewer thinks, that's just one opinion. Well, guess what? If you've got 50 of the same opinion, they could be right.
Yep.
I've done that. I've when somebody's putting a review, why did this happen? I've gone back in a later book and explained why that happened. I'm trying to make it clearer.
I have a plot hole I want to talk about, but speaking of taking review criticism, there was one consistent negative review that I've received on Valor, and I can see it as a missing opportunity for me, although I didn't see it at the time. There's a character, a female character, that goes through a pretty significant traumatic experience in the book, where she's assaulted, and she's suffering from that, but also from other things that happen in the mission. And I had my main character interview her, and the opportunity I missed was having the female investigator that's working with my main character handle that interview, because that's typically how it would be done. And I got not a lot of negative reviews for that, but several people that basically pointed out she would have probably been more open to talking with a female rather than a male in that particular instance. And I was like, absolutely, you're right. I could have made that a little bit more impactful and a little bit more true to life had I done that, but I didn't think about it at the time. So,
well, as your editor, who was also a counselor for 15 years, I'm sorry, I should have caught that too.
Yeah. Well, you got the paper. That was the most important part of it.
Yeah, right?
But the plot hole thing, the whole point of today's show is talking about finding plot holes and how do you fix them and that kind of thing. And I found a plot hole. I've talked about it on the show before in Weaponized as I'm writing the second book, and going back through the first book, I found that one of my characters was basically doing things out of order and didn't have a quantifiable reason for doing what he was doing. And in my mind, plot holes usually are something that is missing from the motivation of the book, or missing as an explanation. So those are the two big things that I look at as plot hole fundamentals. Is there something missing in character motivation, or is there something missing by means of explanation of why something happens? And I found one of those in.
Or is there a
book one.
contradiction?
It could be a contradiction, but I think more often they happen where you're missing context, and it's not presented adequately. And that was one of the things I found in the first book. And so going back and fixing that took some time and took a little bit of rework. But again, that goes to the benefit of how we publish, in that book one isn't published yet. And had I published book one first and then found the plot hole as I was writing book two, I would not have been able to fix it. And then I would have been kind of up shit creek without a paddle, trying to figure out how to retcon it. And but identifying those things, sometimes you can identify them while you're writing them. I mean, a good editor will help you point some of that stuff out. But if you're having just like a copy or a line edit, that editor might not find those issues. And that's one of the reasons I think the way that we write in this space is kind of counterintuitive and almost counterproductive to writing plot hole-less books, because we're doing them so much and so fast that you can't do I'll write a book and set it aside for 6 months and then come back and read it. Because doing that, you can kind of disengage from what you're writing. You can come back, you can look at it again and read through it like you've never read it before, and potentially find those things a lot easier than when you're pumping out 100,000 word novel in a couple of months, and you're just so close to it that you can't see those plot holes.
I found that having the novel read to you aloud by one of those read aloud programs that reads a word file, that you can catch some of those.
Yeah,
I've caught them before. I don't do it as much as I used to, since I have Athon editing my stuff, so I'm not like line editing it myself. But it used to help you catch plot holes a lot.
Dabble has a fantastic feature where it will read your manuscript to you, by the way, just for reference.
Ding.
There's a bit of a marriage between what we were talking about with Patreon, Hive Mind, and what you were talking about with the points that you made. Actually, maybe it doesn't marry with that, but let me just say it anyway. Oftentimes, as writers, well, first of all, to touch on your 100,000 words quickly thing, right? Like there's got to be a moment where you go, what am I doing as an author? Am I looking to write something in the indie space that's going to last forever? Or am I writing the project that takes me to my next project? And am I right? And unfortunately, in this world that we live in, since there are no guarantees, if we spend 3 years writing a book and getting it perfect, and then it doesn't do anything,
right,
we've just lost a whole lot of time and the money that we need, right? Oftentimes we think, readers think that we're all rich.
Yeah.
Enough cons, talk to enough readers who don't understand that most writers, even the successful ones, are writing sort of paycheck to paycheck.
For sure.
Writing for your supper.
Exactly. And so we have to remember that although we wish that we could write books without plot holes, if it still ends up with a 4.5 rating and, over 500 reviews and, whatever that is, if it still ends up and somebody goes, well, I found plot holes, we go, that sucks for you. Let's move on. We're going to.
And plus, if you write a lot of books in a single universe, which I have done.
Yeah.
And you're doing it over a period of 10 years or something, you're going to contradict yourself. There's going to be.
And the joy of what we do, especially Athon with you guys, really all being Athon writers, if Hank ever turns in his books, we have the benefit of you just sending us an email, and this happens in all indie, right? Like if you're self-pubbing, you do it yourself. With Athon, you send me an email and you say, I found this thing in book one I'd like to fix. And then we just change it. And the people who read book one already, they're going to be a little confused at some point. But if you do it right, you just you just edit your book. I've gone back and edited my books before for new readers. But the thing that I was going to say with plot holes is that oftentimes readers find quote unquote plot holes, and it's either lazy reading or impatience, right? Like sometimes it is the way that the character perceives the thing that's happening, and they don't understand that we're seeing things through the character's perspective, and the character's wrong. And maybe 50,000 words from then, they'll realize, oh, the character was wrong. Or 2 books from then, in the kind of writing that we read, like, or we write, like, you'll experience the character was wrong. But then we have to ask ourselves, is that worth it as authors?
Well, and sometimes it's that they've missed something.
True.
Sometimes it's not a plot hole. It's that, like you're saying, maybe not paying attention. They're reading fast, or they're just skimming through certain points. And maybe the plot hole that they experienced was mentioned in a sentence 3 chapters ago.
Right.
And they just, I mean, I've done that before where I'm reading a book and I get to a point and I'm like, I don't understand this.
What did I miss?
I miss something. But then
that's
I'm like,
yep,
yeah,
that's the
I
logical response is,
right.
I missed something.
I missed something, but whatever. They got here, and I'm
You know,
not.
I see that a lot in movies too. People, especially more complex ones, people afterwards are saying, "Oh, this is a big plot hole." I'm like, no, they mention that specifically. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah, you weren't paying
You just
attention.
weren't paying attention.
Right, exactly.
Well, but this happens, in part of our conversation last week, we were talking about a massive fantasy series that we were all kind of meh
Yeah.
on. And I think Rick said that, you know, he got to a couple of books where he was just skipping over whole
Right.
character arcs because he didn't care about those characters. Well, what if there was one of those one sentence, you know, keys to unlock this plot hole, and you just missed it? I'm not picking on you, Rick. I'm just saying that
I
you
didn't
know,
even bother plot holes at that point. I was
well,
just like,
but in that case, is it the reader's fault for not caring enough and just skipping over, or is it the writer's fault for not writing an engaging enough story that Rick didn't want to skip over whole chapters at a time? I mean, you know, that's something we
I
can
think it
quibble
can-
about, but
I think it can go back and forth. I think when you look at whether it was the reader's fault or the author's fault,
yeah,
like, is the something that you missed directly connected to the point of the book, or is it a side character who cut their hair off and you don't understand why they cut their hair off? Does it matter to the overall story of the book? There are like multiple threads that you can tackle, multiple things multiple layers to any story. So is the plot hole to a priority layer? And if that's the point, if that's where the reader is like, I don't understand why they're here, maybe that could have been that the author in their mind was like, I know why they're here. I think I've made it clear, but didn't maybe make it clear enough. But if it's something where it's like, why is eye color blue and it should have been red or something like that, that could definitely be an author mistake. It could be an editor mistake. But I think that, especially if it comes to like the primary point of the book, that should not be relegated to a sentence lost in a paragraph somewhere. You should be able to point to multiple sentences or multiple sequences or sections of the book where you're either explaining the whole or parts of the whole. So by the time the reader gets there, they've encountered it so many times that it's not a question in their mind.
Well, you've also got high and mighty readers out there, and I don't mean to be down on readers. So I love all of you readers. You make us money and help us to do what we
hates
do.
readers. Just
Yeah, I mean, you help us
Yeah.
to do the thing that we love doing. But you do have a lot of those readers out there whose only goal in life is to find the things wrong with the book and then tell everybody on Amazon, right?
Right.
The character's eyes were blue and then later they were green. Who cares? I made a mistake. I'm writing this book, you know, and don't always remember the eye color.
Yeah.
And then that results in a 2-star rating.
Right.
Or like, you know, they used a homonym wrong, you know, whatever, you know, -1 star. And it's like, cool. I wrote 140,000 words. I got 1 word wrong.
Right. Right.
And I lost a star. And then I've got a series right now called The Dragon Blood Assassin, where it goes back and forth between a male perspective and a female perspective. It's read by Michael Kramer and Kate Reading. And I've got a bunch of reviews.
Fantastic narrators.
They did a great job, man. And I've got a bunch of reviews from guys who just hated the female perspective. And I know this is 2023. I know I'm not supposed to make these binary type claims, but scientifically, hormones are different from male to female, and the way that we respond to things are different male to female. And they simply didn't like that the female had emotions that were expressed that the male character doesn't express. Now, I'm a married man for 20 years. I deal with things differently than my wife deals with things. And I think all of us have experienced that. And I know that when I approach something in one way, my wife's going to approach something in another way. And you just get these reviews where you go, can you let your misogynism or whatever that word is, can you just misogyny? Thank you. Can you let your misogyny, like, just tamp it down a little bit for this review? And then they go, I skipped all of the Natisse chapters. And I'm like, well, no wonder you didn't get the story.
Right.
Right.
You skipped 50% of it. We're not rehashing the whole story from both perspectives. That's called bad writing.
Right. Right. Well, if we're editing our novels and we're looking for plot holes or inconsistencies or however you want to frame that, how do you tell the difference in a plot hole and just maybe a missed opportunity? I'll give you a for instance, and maybe it's not a good for instance, but I was in one of these articles I was looking at about plot holes. They referenced the Matrix, and they were talking about the human farm, that was going on in the Matrix, and they were like, they could have used cows, and if they would have used cows, you would have gotten more energy and probably wouldn't have had to worry about the chosen one,
That's been explained. Actually, it was a decision by the Wachowskis. Originally wanted to make the humans not batteries like they wound up being. They wanted to make them computers. They wanted to use their brains for computing power, which would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And it also would have made the Matrix make a lot more sense. But the producers were worried that the people, the audience wouldn't understand that.
Yeah.
And they made them change it, which made the movie worse.
Well, even if you didn't have that explanation, and that's a valid explanation, but even if you didn't have that, would that have been a plot hole, or would that have just been maybe a missed opportunity, or maybe not the best solution? I mean, that's not necessarily a plot hole because it works for what it is.
I think when you look at story, there's always going to be a different way that you can tell the story, or always going to be a different way to solve a particular problem or to set up a particular issue. There's always going to be a different way. So I think, like, for me, when I go back through and I look at things, I go back through in layers and look at it in layers. Is this a plot issue? Is this a character issue? Is this that I had a conversation in the wrong order? And I try to fix those as I go through. But I mean, I don't think that you could ever completely get rid of plot holes, nor should you. I mean, you're going to write the best book that you can. You're going to try to get everything to line up, but you're never going. If somebody says, well, why didn't they just do this? Really the answer is, well, I didn't think of that. I thought of this. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a plot hole or a missed opportunity. You're just writing your story. And that is the way that you chose to deal with, or that your characters chose to deal with the specific issue. There's always going to be different ways to do it. It's like when you look at any story that they're going against a government agency, right? And the government agents, like you mentioned, the villains being dumb and all they can kill everybody, or they're having a shootout and they kill everybody but the main character. Right. And it's like watching a John Wick movie, right? John Wick should have died in the first movie. Like that could be a plot hole, because a big plot hole or plot armor, as the case may be, is this Kevlar suit, right? Like, he puts on this Kevlar suit and he holds his arm up like this and he's blocking bullets. okay, he's not going to get shot, but there's still kinetic energy, or he's not
Right.
they're not going to penetrate. There's still kinetic energy. If even a bulletproof vest that's 2 inches thick is going to bruise your sternum when you get hit because of the kinetic energy. He's holding up his arm. His arm's going to be shattered in 9 different places because of the impacts that he's taking. Is that a plot
Yeah.
hole? I don't know if it's a plot hole.
that's-
It's not great writing, right?
He has Wonder Woman's bracelets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it
You know,
does make for an interesting story, and that was my second point,
Yeah.
is that sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it could just be that you're writing an entertaining story, and we talked about this in our writing meeting yesterday. Look at Twilight, look at 50 Shades of Grey, look at any book that has been the Da Vinci Code. Those books have huge plot holes. They have bad writing. They have horrible characterization, but they were wildly popular and people enjoyed reading them. So I stand on a hill of sometimes it just doesn't matter.
It's very true.
You can write an engaging story. You can have a fun story. It could be bad writing. It could be full of plot holes, and people will love it. Now, again, you want to write the best story that you can, obviously, but sometimes it doesn't matter. And sometimes people are just going to hate it just to hate it. You know, there's people that hate Harry Potter just because of they don't like it. You know,
Harry Potter would have been da 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 da. All Potters are dead. Da da.
Yeah.
That would have been the Potter story if he would have shot him with a gun.
Right.
Yeah.
The story is because Voldemort didn't shoot him with a gun.
Right.
Right.
See, that's I don't consider that a plot hole. Like Hank was saying, that's just a different decision. It's like
Right.
a real plot hole. The one that I thought of that wasn't mentioned in that article, which I thought the article was kind of stupid with the ones that
The article was stupid.
a real plot hole is in Tenet. I don't know if you saw Tenet, but
I
there was
did
a
not
big,
see Tenet.
well, there's a big deal.
I love Tenet.
There's a big deal made in Tenet early on. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's a big deal made about if you are going backwards in time, if you're doing that you have to wear like a respirator because you can't breathe the air. And then later on, the protagonist is going backwards in time doing that car chase thing without any respirator. And I'm like, well, how is he breathing then?
Yeah. Well, Tenet is another example. Well, I think a lot of Christopher Nolan. Is it Christopher Nolan? Yeah. A lot of Christopher Nolan.
Nolan Ryan, weren't you?
Nolan Ryan, yeah. A lot of Nolan Ryan's pitching. A lot of
could have been used in The Matrix.
Yeah, a lot of his movies are entertainment, and the plot, so to speak, is kind of secondary, right? Like they're in Inception. The idea, just the concept of Inception was cool. So it didn't matter that there's a whole bunch of plot holes in that movie. I mean, Inception, I watch Inception for the ending because I think the ending is freaking phenomenal. It's one of the best endings he's ever done. But there's plot holes all through that movie, but it doesn't matter because the concept was so cool that people liked it. Avatar has some of the biggest plot holes ever in the history of plot holes. And it made a gazillion $billion, and it was number 1 worldwide, and so is the second one. And so sometimes, like I go back to the statement I just made, sometimes it doesn't matter if you write an entertaining story and people like it. The plot holes don't matter.
So we just
So what I'm getting is that Josh is advocating for character over plot,
or intriguing story,
Intriguing.
Concept.
I mean, a good character will carry you through a crappy plot 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, look at my biggest example of this is the Dark Tower series. Book 1 through 4 have phenomenal stories, have phenomenal characters, have a great setting. The other books, the last 3 books, have horrible stories, but you still read them because the character of Eddie and Susanna and Oi and the gunslinger are so great that you're just following them through the story.
I think something important when we're doing conversations like this, we often talk as authors to authors, and we bring up all of these things. Like we talk about the difference between plot holes, plot armor, and missed opportunities and all of that. But the reality is readers don't always know the difference.
100%.
And so while we're going to split hairs over these things, they're not going to split hairs over these things. In Lit RPG, for instance, you're not allowed, your character's not allowed to make mistakes. Your character has to meta the game all the time. And if he doesn't do the exact best thing in a scenario, the readers are like, well, he's an idiot. He should have done X, Y, or Z. And my argument, of course, doesn't matter because I don't get to speak to every lit RPG reader on Earth, is that as human beings, we don't always make the best decision. I'm sitting at a desk right now that I put together wrong. And this desk has been my desk for over a year. And if this were a book, people would go, well, why didn't the idiot put it together right to begin with? Well,
Right.
because the idiot put it together wrong and then put all of his stuff on it before he realized that it was wrong, and it still functions as a desk. And I don't
The idiot
really
is too lazy to take all the stuff off.
right? Like, we don't do things the correct way. Dresden, well, he used this spell, the Time Turner. They used this during this book. How come they didn't use it because in split moment decisions, we don't always remember the things that we did that worked last time.
You know, that's a
We're
great
human.
example of you know, just making decisions in general in a stressful situation is really tough. It's really tough, especially when you have seconds. You know, I was a cop for 11 years, and there are a lot of times you have to make a decision with absolutely no time to think about it. You just have to act. Sometimes you make the great one, sometimes you make a bad one, sometimes you make a mediocre one, and then you go back later and you're like, man, if I would have done this, this, or this. So sometimes your plot hole could have been that you purposely wrote the character to make a bad decision. And like you mentioned, lit RPG not really having conflict. I mean, the Star Trek: The Next Generation and the original Star Trek were written because Gene Roddenberry specifically said we cannot have character conflict in these stories, and that's purposely why it was written that way. And when mentioning whether or not readers get it, my wife and I watch a lot of like episodic TV. We're watching Manifest right now. She's not an author at all, and there's a scene in one of the shows where they're trying to find a bomb. I was on the bomb squad for like 5 years. I've built bombs. I've taken them apart. I can look at them and go, this is what it is. This bomb was such I mean, I almost fell off the couch laughing because it was so dumb. But my wife had no context of why it was dumb, because she is not a bomb tech. She has never worked around that kind of stuff. She's never even seen a bomb. And so that, in that aspect, was entertaining to 99% of people that are going to watch that program have no context of why it was stupid.
Did
And
they snip the red wire or blue wire?
Huh.
they did snip a wire, which was really dumb. And you know, they had the bomb suits on, and they walked right up to this cart, popped the panel off, and cut the wire without taking an X-ray, without clearing the area, without identifying the piece of the part. Like, they just did everything wrong.
Yeah,
But
but
that
only
didn't-
you knew.
but
that
only
was
I knew
wrong.
that, right?
Yeah.
And so
Well,
a
the
lot
Matrix
of
was
times,
based on an insane thought about what hacking looks like.
100%.
Right? I have Jeff the Game Master as a series of mine, and it's based upon a guy manipulating code. And I know how to write code. I wrote C++, I wrote Visual Basics, I wrote code for years, Java, right? I know what code looks like, but readers don't know what code looks like, so I made it fantastical.
Right, for
It's
sure.
coding numbers and shit, and one's one color and one's another color. And every now and then I get a coder review going, this guy doesn't know coding. I'm like, I know coding. Coding is boring as hell. That's why I'm not a coder.
Right. A
Right?
lot of
How do we
coding
do-
is just copy and pasting anyway.
That's why.
right?
That's why in movies. That's why in movies, especially for like the '90s, hacking is nothing like it really was. You know, people like doing those. I mean, I remember this one NCIS
Letters.
episode where the two people were on the same keyboard so they could type faster to hack something.
Do you remember the movie Swordfish with John
Yes,
Travolta
yes,
and
yeah.
Hugh and he's
Oh,
doing
yeah.
like
I
he's
remember that
got
movie with Halle
8
Berry.
he's got yeah, true. He's got like 8 screens and like 5 keyboards, and he's like doing a dance
Yeah.
and he's typing, and I'm like, it doesn't work like that. And I'm not even a hacker, but it was really cool to look at.
The way it works is, let me try 1, 2, 3, 4 is this guy's password.
Same combination I have on my luggage.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, we don't write for the experts unless we're writing for the experts, right? But like, when it comes to fiction, you write what is the most entertaining thing for the majority of people, right? Like I think Rick, and I think this was before the show, we were talking about the failures of replicators in Star Trek and all the plot holes that exist with why they can create clothes, but then they also give gifts that are clothes, like those things. And Rick brought up his fabricators in the Drop Trooper universe, and kind of admitted that upon close examination doesn't really make sense, but there's 12 books that most people don't care that it doesn't make sense because they're entertaining books, and that's such a minor squabble to have.
I think it only makes a difference if it's central to a certain plot.
Right.
And unfortunately, Star Trek has made the Replicator central to a couple of different episodes. If they just been in the background, I don't think anybody would care.
I think too that you look at like what type of book are you reading, and like for instance, a lot of us write science fiction. Faster Than Light Travel is a plot hole like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. Like, but then they
plot hole. That's not what a plot hole is.
It's no, it's not a plot hole, but it's
a fictional thing.
But it's the one big lie, right? Like
but I'm saying like if you're focused on how come this didn't happen, you're like they're traveling through space faster than light. They can't do that. Like this is a book that is fantastical. Why are you focusing on this over here? It doesn't matter.
I saw one where it was a meme the other day where it's talking about Chief O'Brien in the Star Trek universe. And he's like, the greatest transporter chief that ever existed. And the Klingons were on their ship, whatever. And it's like, and the greatest chief didn't think about transporting them into space. Right? Like this is a big thing that if you really think about it, anyone's on board that you don't want on board, you transport them into the vacuum of space. The threat is over. And I was reading this Reddit thread
resolved
of answers, and one of the answers I thought was genius. It was that we don't know this, but probably there's a safety measure put in place where you can't accidentally send somebody into the vacuum of space.
True.
Otherwise, you'd have the instances of Captain Kirk accidentally being shipped off into Starland and he's dead. And so, like,
you know where to solve that is you don't have to like make that how it works, but you just have to have one sentence in one episode that says, "Well, hey, why don't we just transport them to space?" Well, we can't do that. There's safeties we can't override.
And like
one person mentioning that once,
right?
Yeah,
right. But when you're talking about a franchise that spans, 9 shows, whatever it is, and
decades.
Thousands of episodes. Like, are you going through every one of these episodes to find that?
Someone is.
Someone might.
Yeah.
I actually had
someone is, and someone has built a website around it.
Yeah.
I had a neighbor growing up that thought Star Trek was a documentary in space. Now, this dude was a little loony. He had every episode on VHS, and he would die. You lived
next to the kids from Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, man, this guy went
right.
He thought it was real, man. He thought it was a reality show before reality shows existed, and swore, that existed. Anyway,
so if we're looking at our own work and we see something that is a potential plot hole or has the potential to throw readers off, to break the connection that the reader has with the story, if it throws them out of the story, how do we approach fixing that? Do we look for ways to immerse them more into the story where that doesn't matter? Do we try to hem up the plot holes so that we close the continuity, or how do you approach those? What's your first line of defense?
If you catch it before it's published,
we're talking before publication.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to fix the plot hole. You change as little as possible in order to make that plot hole not a plot hole anymore. If it's after it's published, if it's a series, your only choice is to go back later in another book and explain why it wasn't a plot hole, or come up with some reason that people will buy why it's not a plot hole. But
a lot of times,
destroy your story. Does it totally destroy the story? If it does, I don't know what your answer is. You don't have an answer. If it doesn't, I advocate for sometimes ignoring it.
Yeah.
Move on.
Like I said, sometimes it doesn't matter, but like if I'm writing a story and I found a plot hole, I've found many plot holes. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy to fix. But sometimes, man, I just sit for a couple of days and write down like what could they do, and I come up with 8 different variations on what they can do and how does that apply. Does that affect something later on in the story? Does it not? And then, like Rick said, try to go with the easiest one. Because if you can do that and not rewrite a whole bunch of other things, you're going to save yourself time, especially if it's not a priority plot hole. If it's a big plot hole that really, really, really affects the story, I don't know that I've ever come across something like that. Because generally, those big things I've worked out ahead of time and I understand what I need to make that big thing happen. A lot of times I'll find plot holes, like for instance, the one I was working on last week was an inciting incident that happened off page. And I hadn't in my mind, I hadn't worked it out because in my mind, I was like, I don't need to work it out yet. That's something for later because I'm not writing that later. Well, then when I finally got to it, I realized, oh, I should have worked this out ahead of time. So I could have based the actions of this character on what he was trying to do. So in that aspect, it was kind of a big deal, but not the incident itself wasn't. It was how does the character respond to it? But yeah, I mean, you've just really got to take the time to figure out, like we said, is it a big deal? Do you need to worry about it, or do you just need to understand that it's there, maybe fix it in the future, or just leave it alone? Because every single story that's ever been told has plot holes. So it really just depends on how much time are you on a time crunch. You know, is it going to affect the overall story in such a big way that people are going to read it and go, this is a horrible plot hole, I'm never reading a book by Josh Hayes again? Or am I going to give grace, like Steve said, and go on? Or is it something that the readers aren't even going to get a catch? That the only reason you're catching it is because you're the writer and you're looking at it through writer's eyes and you're looking at your story going, this doesn't make sense to me. Are the readers going to care about it? I mean, I don't have a beta reader team, but I know a lot of authors that do. And a lot of authors will, say you have 20 beta readers. If 5 people catch the plot hole and 15 people don't, do you fix it? Now, if 18 people catch it, that's probably something you might want to look at.
Not if you have 18,000 sales.
100%. I'm just saying, like, as a ratio, as a comparative ratio, right?
Sure.
If only 20% of your readers are catching it, it might not be a big thing.
So I've got a couple of little things in the Dragon Blood series that I've struggled a little bit with. And Andy Peliquin and I wrote this together, and they're 200,000 words each. And when you're writing a series together, it's often difficult to, if I'm being honest, sort of remember the things the other person wrote when they're really little details. And so as I'm going through and finishing up book 3 here, I'm also listening to book 1 on audio. And that's when things get difficult for me, is when something's already done on audio. And I am much bigger on audio than I am anywhere else. My audio matters to me more than my ebooks do. I have an opportunity to go back and fix the ebook, but I've got no choice with the audio. Right. So I had 2 things come up in book 3. First of all, book 1, one of our characters has this cough that we had written in such a way that it really should have mattered. It was just a character trait. We forgot about it in book 2.
Yeah.
Right. So in book 3, we found a way to explain that somebody had given them a healing draft, that whatever. It works totally fine, unless you just focus on book 2 and you don't get to book 3 because you're so offended that this cough no longer exists. Another one is the character is the Black Talon. He's the Emperor's assassin, and no one's supposed to know about that. And we even say in book 1, only certain people know about it. And then in book 2, we a little bit forgot that, and one of the characters knew. So in book 3, I had to go back and make our main character ignorant to the fact that somebody had spilled the beans. It works. If you read the series, it works.
Yeah.
But they're my bad. I screwed up. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, can you explain it away? And are you willing to lose a couple of readers that get pissed off in the book that you forgot about it? I don't know.
Okay.
Can I just say that Steve is holding a snake?
I am.
I just want to say that. That's
So,
insane to me.
I've got
That's a plot hole.
this
That's
is
a plan. Yeah.
this is Nagini. And I just got him, and I don't have the proper heat set up for him. And I looked over at him, and he was really trying to get warm on this
Yes,
heat
because
mat.
he's Satan's hand puppet.
No, he is. He's adorable.
You know, I have nothing against snakes as far as like them being, you know, creepy or but the only thing my son had a snake for a while, and that cage stank like nothing else I have ever
So I'm
smelled.
building a vivarium for him that is entirely exists basically without my involvement. It poops, it goes into the soil, it feeds the plants. That'll be the goal, and it won't smell.
Look,
It's
I
not-
have a couple of rules that I live by, and these are non-negotiables. One, never have a pet that can take you. So, you know,
True.
and number two, never have a pet that doesn't have shoulders. Those are non-negotiables with me. Those are non-negotiables.
Look, I know you guys have seen that thing where the tail of the snake is like hanging down from the ceiling, and like there's 3 or 4 or 5 people looking around it, and then the drywall breaks, and it's like a 30-foot snake that's like it's this big, and you're like, nope, I'm out, gone.
Nope.
I have nope. I threw my phone across the room. I don't deal with that nonsense. Not at all.
Nope. So, snake aside, Steve, you're an editor and a publisher. We've talked about what you have done in your writing specifically, but what happens when you get a manuscript for someone and there's a gaping hole there that they have not seen? What is your advice to the writer when you see this thing?
That's a tough answer, because a lot of it for Aethon depends on that author's sort of following, right? Like a lot of our books have gone through deep vetting through Patreon, Royal Road, whatever it is. And if they've got 100,000 readers that don't care, then I don't care.
They're rich.
Hey, I mean, truth is truth. Now, if it's a new author who is sending in a manuscript for the first time, and me or one of our editors glaring, we put in a comment and tell them to send, to figure out how to fix this. And oftentimes, I just had one that took 2 years. An author took 2 years to finish addressing edits on his manuscript, because we found some things that were glaring and altered the course of the entire series. One of the reasons I don't edit anymore, and Josh knows this because he's one of the last people I edited personally. I don't edit anymore because I end up rewriting your story for you. I don't have any interest in sending you a comment to fix something when I can just do it myself. And that's not an editor's job, but that's one of the reasons when I was a full-time editor that a lot of my clients came to me, because they knew that I would just fix it.
Yep.
And it didn't take me long. I mean, I write for a living. It's just like, okay, I just had to write a paragraph. We're done. Now the author doesn't have to address it. He doesn't have to figure it out. All he needs to do is look at it and go, I like that, or I don't like it, and I'll change it, whatever. Yeah. So there's a few different ways to do it. Most editors send a note saying, this doesn't work, figure it out. And here's how I think you could figure it out.
I think one of the easiest ways to spot plot holes in your own writing is not only listening to it. I think, Rick, that was a great idea, but also instead of reading it, take each chapter and kind of do the reverse outline. I've done this before, where you take each chapter, you read the chapter, and then you write down bullet points of main plot points. This is what happened. And then as you're going through your book, do this happened, so this happened, and this happened, so this happened, and do that for every chapter. And if you can see the string of story connecting those sentences, then you should be theoretically able to find the significant plot holes that you should fix. If you have a chapter that you can't go, this happened, so this happened, and this is happening for no reason, that's a plot hole, and you need to address that, and then kind of move on. I've done that several times, and it helps kind of look at, instead of reading all the dialogue and all the description and all that, you break it down to the simple bare part of that chapter or that sequence or that scene and go, this happened, I know this happened, I know I need this to happen, does this equal this? And it's all just a calculation, a arithmetic, an algorithm of story.
Super easy to do with the Dabble plot grid, by the way.
For sure.
Yeah.
I love Dabble. I use it all the time.
Absolutely. Well, that is our time for today, folks. Plot holes, look for them, decide if they matter or not, and do better in the next book if that's the solution for it.
100%.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you, sir.